Thanks for stopping by to watch this analysis of director Christopher Nolan's 2014 epic science fiction action thriller Interstellar, co-written by Christopher Nolan with his brother Jonathan Nolan. If you like this Interstellar film analysis, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, The Godfather of Cinema, where you'll find more movie analysis such as this one in my playlist, Cinema Geeks. I would also appreciate it if you would leave a thumbs up and a comment letting me know what you think of this video, and I would also appreciate you hitting the bell under this video to be notified of videos I'll be uploading in the future. In Interstellar, environmental upheavals brought about by human overpopulation and expansion, overplowed farmlands, deforestation, and the burning of fossil fuels has depleted Earth to the point where it can no longer grow food in the not so distant future. The last crop of okra has been harvested and only corn remains. However, after it succumbs to blight as well, the last generation of humans will be the first generation to die of suffocation as nitrogen and dust bowl conditions choke off the remaining oxygen. The armed services of every nation, including NASA, with all of its engineers and pilots, are defunded as farming and growing food become top priority. Professor Brand, a high-ranking NASA official, believes that Earth, as far as man is concerned, is coming to an end. 48 years ago, a space-time disturbance near Saturn opened a wormhole to another galaxy with 12 potentially habitable worlds. Wormholes are not naturally occurring phenomena. What this means is that someone deliberately placed it there to help mankind leave Earth. A farmer named Cooper and his daughter named Murphy see lines of dust on the floor of her room. These lines of dust turn out to be binary coordinates to NASA's underground facility in the desert, and it is here that they meet Professor Brand. Cooper used to be a pilot for NASA before blight, the need for food, and a shift in priorities forced the government to defund the agency. Officially. Unofficially, NASA still operates in secret under Professor Brand, who wants Cooper to join a crew of fellow space travelers on the Endurance expedition. Cooper used to be NASA's best pilot, and now NASA and the world needs him to go into the wormhole to find a new planet for humanity. Cooper's only problem with this proposition is relativity, or time dilation, which is the difference in the elapsed time measured by two clocks. The watch he gave his daughter Murphy relative to the watch he takes with him to outer space. Time will come to a virtual standstill for Cooper in interstellar space. However, time will speed up significantly for Murphy and his family on Earth, meaning that even if he does find a new planet for mankind, he may not make it back to Earth in time to see his family. Here are the themes I will cover in this analysis of Interstellar. In the near future, blight destroys almost all of the crops on Earth. NASA has to operate secretly because the public has come to learn that growing food is more important than wars and space exploration. Unfortunately, this new awareness of the things that really matter in life comes too little too late, as Professor Brand of NASA believes that the world, as man has known it, is coming to an end. 48 years ago, a disturbance in space-time, or wormhole to another galaxy, materialized out of nowhere near Saturn. And since wormholes are not naturally occurring phenomena, someone deliberately placed it within Earth's reach so that future generations could discover it in time to save mankind. Professor Brand knows this because he sent 12 human probes in 12 separate Ranger shuttles through the wormhole to investigate 12 worlds possessing Earth-like qualities. Professor Brand made sure that the 12 space travelers he selected for the Lazarus missions had no families, friends, or other attachments, space travelers who were willing to sacrifice their own lives to save a future generation instead of selfish space travelers who were only interested in saving Earth, themselves, and the people they cared about. Whether from a movie, a TV show, or the news, most of us have at least heard of DNA and how accurate it is in identifying who we are as individuals. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is a self-replicating material found in almost all organic life forms. DNA is a blueprint that determines how we will develop, grow, and function. DNA information is found in blood, saliva, semen, hair, and even skin cells. Ever since DNA was first used to convict a Florida rapist in 1987, it has been touted by mainstream media as virtually foolproof in identifying someone, as reliable in identifying an individual as his or her social security number. In October 2011, in the city of Southwest England, a man convicted by DNA evidence of raping a woman in a city he claims to have never visited was exonerated. Prosecutors dropped their case against Adam Scott of Exeter in Devonshire for a rape that occurred 190 miles away in Manchester due to contamination that took place when the vial containing DNA samples from the scene of the crime was stored in a container with 7 or 8 vials of DNA samples from other cases. The lesson to be learned from this case is that you cannot always trust the facts, especially when facts have a way of changing. And speaking of people who only trust facts, in Interstellar, Cooper insists that things that he cannot see, analyze, or test, like the ghost that Murphy claims that she sees in her room, are not real. And yet, Cooper believes that the Apollo moon missions were real because he and millions of other people around the world saw them on live television, even though updated textbooks at Murphy School describe how America faked the moon missions in order to deceive the Soviet Union into pouring all of its resources into useless machines. Children don't lie because they haven't lived long enough to understand how much the truth hurts. Also, speaking of the truth, Cooper becomes angry with the principal at Tom's school for telling him that Tom's test score is not high enough for him to get a scholarship. Instead of pursuing a degree in engineering, the principal believes that Tom should take up farming like his father. The principal is blunt with Cooper. With the food shortages and crop failures, the world no longer needs engineers. It needs farmers. Therefore, Tom should do something useful and practical with his life, like the brain that Cooper takes out of the military surveillance drone to run one of the combines on his farm at the beginning of the film. In the book of Exodus, God, through Moses, orders Pharaoh to free the Hebrew slaves. When Pharaoh refuses to free the slaves, God punishes Egypt with 10 plagues. Pharaoh eventually releases the slaves. However, had he done so sooner, the slaves would have cost him nothing, including his firstborn son. Like Pharaoh, we sometimes hold on to things that we should let go of, such as Cooper's belief that the Apollo missions were real while rejecting updated information of the Apollo missions, of how they were faked in order to deceive the Soviet Union into wasting all of its resources on useless machines. But Cooper is not alone in holding on to things he should let go of. More on this later. We have to let air out to take air in. We have to leave one place to go someplace else. We have to give love to receive love. We have to sow in order to reap. We have to give something up in order to gain something. And sometimes we have to die so that others can live. In spiritual and physical terms, everything is a transaction, everything a sacrifice. Nothing is free and everything costs. In order to move forward in anything, we have to learn to let go. In the early 1990s, there was a company called Blockbuster, which was at that time the world's largest video rental company with more than 9,000 locations. Prior to Blockbuster, there was the neighborhood movie rental, but after Blockbuster, all of the small neighborhood video rentals dried up. Then came Netflix in 1997. Instead of competing toe-to-toe with Blockbuster, Netflix rented movies by mail, even though most people still preferred the convenience of renting movies from a physical location instead of waiting for movies to arrive by mail. The internet was very young back then and was not widely used or trusted yet. But like the modern highways and automobiles, which drove horses and buggies to extinction, the virtual highways being built at that time would soon change the way that people watched movies. In 2003, Netflix announced that it had over 1 million subscribers. A year later, Blockbuster started renting its movies by mail. 2007, and 1 billion DVDs later, Netflix started phasing out its DVD by mail service in order to focus on streaming its content over the internet. 2 years later, Blockbuster launched its own movie streaming platform until finally in 2010, Blockbuster announced that it was filing for bankruptcy. This is what happens when one fails to adapt. In Interstellar, man's extinction is imminent, and yet Cooper would rather save Earth than to let go of it to find a new planet to save the next generation. As I pointed out with Blockbuster, the ability to adapt and innovate are essential for survival. Examples we see in Cooper reprogramming the brain of a surveillance drone to run one of the combines on his farm. We also see Cooper's ability to adapt when he goes from being a pilot to being a farmer as a result of budget cuts to NASA. Because of blight and vanishing crops, society has also had to adapt by shifting its priorities away from waging wars and space exploration to growing food and saving the environment. For as Murphy is suspended from her school for fighting a classmate who teases her about Cooper's old textbooks containing the Apollo missions, which never happened, and as Cooper becoming upset with the principal at Tom's school for saying that Tom should be a farmer instead of going to college and studying to be something that the world does not need. Truth can be a hard pill to swallow. Therefore, instead of telling Cooper the truth up front that the world is coming to an end, Professor Brand deceives Cooper into believing that the world can be saved if he agrees to fly NASA's Ranger shuttle through the wormhole by Saturn to the Endurance, the agency's last versatile orbiter. Once there, Cooper and 3 fellow crew members will collect data on 3 planets and choose the one that has the best data and potential for supporting human colonization. Professor Brand also deceives Cooper by promising to have the gravity equation solved by the time that he returns to Earth. In fact, Professor Brand tells Cooper that all of his previous training at NASA was intended to prepare him for this mission. But for security reasons, the agency could not tell Cooper at that time that they were preparing him for a future mission to find a new home for mankind. Therefore, if NASA could not tell Cooper that they were training him to find a new home for the future of humanity without taking away his hope that Earth could be saved by the gravity equation, how could Cooper be honest with Murphy about his real chances of returning to Earth without taking away her hope of ever seeing him again? Professor Brand selected the 12 scientists that he selected for the Lazarus space shuttle missions because they did not have families, friends, or any other attachments to Earth, their home that could distract them from finding a new planet for the future of humanity. Professor Brand knows that humans are naturally selfish. Therefore, he believes that scientists with no families or attachments to Earth are less likely to think of human survival only in terms of themselves and the people they left behind on Earth. Dr. Doyle, who has no family, friends, or other attachments to Earth, has no problem with the strong gravity on Miller's planet, where 1 hour is the same as 7 years on Earth. Cooper, on the other hand, has a family on Earth, and he would like to make it back to Earth in time to see them. However, he may never see them again if they spend too much time on Miller's planet. Doyle has zero empathy for Cooper's dilemma due to the fact that they only know each other professionally. Therefore, Doyle's eyes are perfectly clear as to their mission, and he can see things objectively, unencumbered by any of the emotional baggage of what may or may not happen while they are on Miller's planet that could jeopardize his chances of seeing anyone he left behind on Earth, for he has no attachments on Earth. And therefore, to Doyle, it is not about what Cooper may lose as it is about what the human race stands to gain by letting go of the past and saving the next generation. Cooper's preoccupation with himself and his family in this scene exemplifies Professor Brand's belief that humans are naturally selfish, and that if it came down to human survival, they would only save themselves and those closest to them. On August 2, 1964, American destroyer USS Maddox allegedly fired on several hostile North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. 2 days later, on August 4, 1964, both the USS Turner Joy and USS Maddox were allegedly attacked in the same area. These attacks moved Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution that same year, which gave President Lyndon B. Johnson the power to expand America's role in the Vietnam War. 2/3 of the American public supported America's role in the Vietnam War at the outset. The Tet Offensive, however, changed everything. In 1968, North Vietnamese forces initiated a surprise attack during the Tet holiday in which North and South Vietnam observed a temporary ceasefire. In all, the North Vietnamese army ambushed 120 South Vietnamese and American bases. The Tet Offensive had two objectives. One, to weaken the confidence of the American forces, and two, to incite the South Vietnamese people to overthrow their leader and U.S. puppet Nguyen Van Thieu. And although the North Vietnamese army failed to accomplish their objectives, they did succeed on two fronts. Number one, the attack resulted in the deaths of over 7,000 American soldiers, which eroded public support for the war in America. Number two, the attack disheartened President Johnson, who refused to seek a second term. Like any good heist film, plans are always easier to execute on paper, like the flat tire on Cooper's truck at the beginning of the film, which sets the tone for other things that can and do go wrong throughout the film. For instance, Cooper's plan for their mission to Miller's planet was simple. Take a Ranger shuttle to the planet, retrieve the data, retrieve Dr. Miller, and return to the main ship. Executed perfectly, the operation would take only 1 hour and cost Cooper only 7 years away from his family on Earth. Cooper's perfect plan, however, has a flaw. It leaves no room for the unexpected. Like their shuttle being hit and flooded by a giant tidal wave, Dr. Doyle drowning, and having to stay longer than they planned on Miller's planet to allow water from the giant tidal wave that struck them to drain out of the shuttle's engines. What starts out as a perfectly planned 1 hour operation ends up taking several hours and costing Cooper 23 years away from Earth and his family. Would you marry someone who you know will cheat on you? Would you put your trust in someone you know will betray you? Would you start a business if you know that you will go bankrupt? would you get out of bed in the morning if you know that you are going to be killed in an accident later that day? Now in Interstellar, would Cooper have taken the ship to Miller's planet if he knew that a giant tidal wave would hit the ship, flood it, and cause him to lose 23 years with his family in only a matter of hours? No. Would Amelia Brand have left Earth and her aging father, Professor Brand, to find Dr. Edmonds if she knew for certain that Dr. Edmonds was already dead? No. And would Dr. Romilly have waited alone on the main ship for Doyle, Dr. Brand, and Cooper to return from Miller's planet if he had known that he would be alone for 23 years instead of only 2 years? Again, the answer is no, because some things are not meant to be known, especially in advance. Cooper does not believe in anything that he cannot see or prove scientifically. However, you do not need faith to believe what you can see. You need faith to believe what you cannot see. As Murphy believes that there is a ghost in her room because she trusts her instincts. Speaking of hope in something for which there is no evidence or proof, Cooper places his trust in Professor Brand's promise and not guarantee that he will have solved the gravity equation by the time he returns to Earth. Following their setback on Miller's planet, Cooper, Dr. Brand, and Romilly faced the tough choice of whether to go to Dr. Edmonds' planet or to Dr. Mann's planet, of whether to use their fuel, their most precious resource besides food and oxygen, to go to a planet with no proof of life, or to use their fuel to go to a planet that is transmitting a signal indicating that there is definitely proof of life. There is only enough fuel to visit one of the planets in a return trip to Earth. So choosing the wrong planet will leave only enough fuel to plant the fertilized human eggs on the remaining planet to save the future of humanity. For Cooper, to choose the wrong planet meant two things. One, no return trip to Earth. And two, he will never see his family again. So which planet would you choose? Dr. Brand chooses Dr. Edmonds' planet because she loves him and traveled more than 1 billion miles of dark, cold, empty space to find him. You would think that Cooper's emotional attachment with his own family would make him sympathetic to Dr. Brand's attachment with Dr. Edmonds. However, it doesn't. As far as Cooper is concerned, he and Dr. Brand are simply colleagues. Ironically, Cooper's emotional detachment from Dr. Brand and Dr. Edmonds enables him to see their mission objectives and overall goal clearly, unlike Dr. Brand, whose view of their mission is selfish because of her love for Dr. Edmonds. Like Dr. Doyle, Cooper does not have any distractions because the lives of his loved ones are not at stake. Dr. Brand wants to use their precious fuel to take one of their shuttles down to Dr. Edmonds' planet. However, Cooper overrules her because she is being selfish, for when it comes to anyone other than those he is attached to, the precious fuel of their shuttle should only be used for the benefit of the human race and not for the benefit of a single man. But it is not like Cooper left Earth because he cared about saving the human race or even his own kids for that matter. Remember, he used to be a pilot for NASA before public opinion soured against the U.S. government wasting tax dollars on unnecessary programs like NASA, forcing Cooper to give up something that he believes that he was born to do in order to become something useful that the world needed, a farmer. Accepting Professor Brand's offer to save Earth was really a selfish decision on his part to pursue his own dream, and which is also why Donald, his father, told him not to trust the right thing done for the wrong reason, as Dr. Brand choosing Dr. Edmonds' planet is also her way of rationalizing her own selfish motives at the expense of the greater interest of mankind. In 2017, Wilbert Jones walked out of Parish Prison in East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a free man after serving 45 years and 10 months of a life sentence for a crime he did not commit. In 1974, a Louisiana jury found Jones guilty of raping a woman in 1971. The victim, a nurse, described her attacker's height as 5 feet 8 inches tall, 5 feet 9 inches tall, or 6 feet 3 inches tall. There was no forensic or physical evidence linking Jones to the rape except for the victim's testimony. Nevertheless, Jones was found guilty despite these two facts. 1. The victim said that Jones's rough voice did not match her attacker's voice, which was smoother. And 2. The prosecution did not inform the defense that a serial rapist had been recently arrested who fit the victim's description. In 2003, a nonprofit law office called the Innocence Project looked into Wilbert Jones's case, uncovered the discrepancies in how prosecutors had mishandled his case, and in October of 2017, a district judge in Louisiana vacated Wilbert Jones's case based on those discrepancies. The moral of this story can be summed up this way: just because something cannot be proven to exist, in this case, Wilbert Jones's innocence, does not mean that the evidence for proving that that thing exists does not exist. Like the information that Louisiana prosecutors withheld to convict Wilbert Jones of aggravated rape, Cooper in Interstellar does not believe that ghosts exist because there is no scientific way or evidence to prove that they exist. Murphy, however, reminds Cooper that he told her that science is about admitting what we do not know. Therefore, it is human nature to accept what we do not know and what we do not see as fact, despite the fact that what we see and what we know is limited to what we see and what we know. And due to the fact that Tom does not receive any visual confirmation that his father is alive, he accepts what he does not see or have evidence of as proof that his father is dead. Now, compare this with Cooper, who doubts the existence of ghosts because he cannot see them either. And this goes back to the black hole and the unknown and the fact that there is no way to visually confirm what the singularity inside of a black hole looks like. Dr. Brand's belief that Dr. Edmonds' planet is better than Dr. Mann's planet is based on the fact that she loves Dr. Edmonds, a fact that makes her believe that Dr. Edmonds' planet is better than Dr. Mann's planet a blind belief that impairs her ability to consider any information that goes against how she feels. Cooper and Dr. Brand reject anything that threatens what they have chosen to believe. This is why Cooper does not believe in anything, including the ghost in Murphy's room, that cannot stand up to science. Cooper also believes that the Apollo moon missions were real because he and millions of other people around the world saw men walking on the moon on live television, even though updated textbooks at Murphy's school describe how America faked the moon missions in order to deceive the Soviet Union into pouring all of its resources into useless machines. Cooper's refusal to entertain anything that challenges his beliefs is a blind spot that makes him vulnerable to deception, as Dr. Mann exploits Cooper's blind trust in data and facts by faking the data on his ice planet in order to be rescued. Time dilation occurs when an object approaches the speed of light. Since the speed of light remains constant at 299,792,458 meters per second, the faster an object moves through space, the slower that object moves through time, which in this case dilates or slows down. On the other hand, the slower an object moves through space, the faster that object moves through time, which in this case contracts or speeds up. Time's real value then is relative, which is why old people say that the less time that you have, the less time that you have to waste. Time is slow for the young but fast for the old. This is relativity. But for two people of the same age, time is relatively equal. However, time for those on Earth compared with time for those on Miller's planet is unequal, as 1 hour on Miller's planet is the same as 7 years on Earth, which is like a 50-mile race between someone walking 3 to 4 miles per hour and a car going 8,765.82 miles per hour. For a car traveling this fast, the race would be over before you could get halfway up one city block on foot. It is for this reason that each second of each minute, unlike time on Earth, is extremely valuable in interstellar space. As valuable as the rapidly shrinking food, oxygen, and fuel supplies on the spaceship Endurance, and as valuable as clean air and food became on Earth after the droughts and blight consumed all of the crops. Cooper once took time for granted when he was on Earth. However, the vast disparities in the speed of time between Miller's planet and Earth has made Cooper more aware of time. For it takes just a few hours on Miller's planet for Tom to turn 17 and meet a girl, for him to marry Lewis in his 20s, for Tom's wife to give birth to Jesse, their first child, and for Tom to bury his grandpa next to Jesse and his mother behind the farmhouse. Tom continued to send Cooper messages, unlike Murphy, who refused to send Cooper any messages after he left Earth. At that time, she was only 10 years of age. Therefore, when she does send him a message at 40 years of age, without any messages marking time in between, it is as though her entire life has been redefined by two extremes, that of a girl and that of a grown woman. He gave her a watch before he left Earth and told her that her watch would speed up so that by the time he got back to Earth, they would be the same age. She curses him for breaking this promise. Because messages can enter the wormhole, Cooper sees his children become adults in only a matter of hours. However, since messages cannot be sent out of the wormhole, his children cannot see him change and can only remember him as he was to them before he left Earth. This too is relativity. So while their lives on Earth are moving forward, Cooper's life in outer space is at a standstill because he cannot let go of the past and a world that is quickly coming to an end. Change can be difficult. Even though God freed the Hebrew slaves and brought them out of Egypt, they remained slaves by settling on some land short of the land God had promised them. Out of his anger, God made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years to kill off those among the former slaves who refused to let go of the past and move forward. And likewise, Cooper can update the brain of an obsolete surveillance drone to run one of the combines on his farm. He can go from being a pilot to being a farmer after the government cuts funding to NASA, where he used to be a pilot. And yet Cooper refuses to evolve from old ways of thinking. For example, he insists on believing that the Apollo moon landings were real when in fact they were faked in order to trick the Soviet government into wasting all of its resources on useless machines. He also refuses to accept the truth that Earth is changing and that it is time for man to leave it and find a new planet for the future of humanity. And as it is time for man to leave Earth, it is also time for Cooper's son Tom to leave the family farm. However, because the farm has been in his family for generations, has taken care of his family, and his mother, grandfather, and child are also buried on the farm, Tom refuses to let go of the farm and find a new home for his family elsewhere, even though the Dust Bowl conditions on the farm has made the air unbreathable and unhealthy for his son Coop, who is developing serious lung issues. Like Cooper and Tom, Dr. Brand also refuses to let go of her attachment to a dead man and move on with her life. Dr. Romilly had read about relativity, but he had never experienced long stretches of isolation prior to spending 23 years by himself on the main ship waiting for Cooper, Dr. Brand, and Dr. Doyle to return from Miller's planet, a main ship made to feel even more isolated by the vastness of outer space. The human need for attachment is so powerful that Romilly chose to stay awake and wait for them to return to the ship instead of going into hypersleep, something he would not do, he told them, because he did not want to dream his life away waiting for them to return. As Murphy is suspended from her school for fighting a classmate for teasing her about Cooper's old textbooks with the Apollo moon landings, and as Cooper becomes upset with the principal at Tom's school for saying that Tom should be a farmer instead of going to college to study engineering, which is something that the world does not need. Truth can be a hard pill to swallow. For if Amelia Brand had known for certain that Dr. Edmonds was dead, she may not have signed on with the Endurance. And if Dr. Romilly had known in advance how relativity and loneliness really felt, he may not have chosen to stay by himself on the Endurance to wait for Cooper, Dr. Brand, and Dr. Doyle to return from Miller's planet. In fact, Cooper may not have chosen Miller's planet in the first place if he had known in advance that doing so would take 23 years away from him and his family. He may not even have left his family if he had known in advance that he would never see them again. And he definitely would not have chosen Dr. Mann's planet over Dr. Edmonds' planet if he had known in advance that Dr. Mann had faked the data on his planet in order to be rescued. And finally, Dr. Mann himself would not have signed on with the Lazarus shuttle missions if he had known in advance that he would end up on a planet that could not support human life. For in order to find another planet to save the human race, Cooper has to leave his family, unlike the 12 scientists that Professor Brand selected for the Lazarus missions who had no families or anyone else that they cared about on Earth. Therefore, the space travelers of the Lazarus missions broke alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange because they wanted to save the future of humanity without offering anything in return. However, nothing is free, as saving the human race also comes with a price. And if Cooper or Dr. Mann had known in advance the price they would be asked to pay in order to save the human race, they would not have paid it. Tom refuses to let go of the past by his refusal to leave the farm, even at the expense of his family's health because of the dust storms. Dr. Amelia Brand continues to live in the past instead of accepting the fact that Dr. Edmonds is dead. Attachments of any kind makes man fearful of change. Professor Brand did not want the people he chose for the Lazarus missions to be attached to a dying planet. However, Professor Brand's plan backfires when Dr. Mann, his best scientist on the Lazarus missions, gives in to the fear of being left alone to die on a planet that cannot support human life. Professor Brand chooses humans for space travel instead of robots because humans have the ability to transform fear into innovative ideas and solutions, unlike robots which cannot be programmed to fear death. On the other hand, Professor Brand also believes that humans with families are selfish and that humans with strong emotional attachments have trouble adapting to change, letting go, and moving forward into the unknown. Therefore, Professor Brand's plan to save mankind is letting go of Earth and incubating 5,000 fertilized human eggs on one of the 12 planets in a galaxy on the other side of a wormhole that NASA discovered 48 years ago. To accomplish this, Professor Brand sends 12 humans in 12 separate Ranger shuttles through the wormhole to study 12 planets to find that one planet with the best potential for supporting human colonization. These 12 shuttle missions are collectively known as the Lazarus missions. Professor Brand selected men and women that he wanted to think and behave like robots, scientists that would think logically and rely on data, and not scientists that would formulate their conclusions on things that they could not perceive in 3 dimensions. Professor Brand wanted the men and women he selected for the Lazarus shuttle missions to trust only what they could see, hear, touch, and test. He did not want these scientists to put their trust in intangible things such as their emotions, speculation, and worst of all, their instincts. Like Professor Brand, Cooper also discounted the value and existence of things that he could not physically discern in three-dimensional space, such as the ghost in Murphy's room and love. When Dr. Brand told Cooper that her love for Dr. Edmonds and his planet were both real and measurable to her, Cooper told her that love was nothing more than a social utility. And as the U.S. government and NASA faked the Apollo missions in order to trick the Soviet government into squandering all of its resources on useless machines, Dr. Mann fakes the data of his planet in order to deceive Cooper into choosing the wrong planet. Dr. Mann nearly kills Cooper, who barely survives. However, this experience is an epiphany to Cooper. He had it all wrong. Love was not a social utility, as he had told Amelia Brand. Love was real, and as Amelia had been drawn away from humanity by going after the data recorder on Miller's planet, a decision which costed Dr. Doyle his life. He, Cooper, had been drawn away from humanity by allowing himself to be misled by the data that Dr. Mann had manipulated in order to trick him into selecting the wrong planet. Cooper apologizes to Dr. Brand. They should have followed her instincts to the right planet, Dr. Edmonds' planet, as it is our instincts which enable us to see what our eyes alone cannot see, which was, in this case, Dr. Mann's deception. And later in the film, when Cooper enters the black hole, he also enters the tesseract, where objects that are not visible or scientifically discernible in three-dimensional space are tangible. And here he sees Murphy from behind the bookcase in her room, first as a 10-year-old girl and then, in the blink of an eye, as a 38-year-old woman. He also realizes that he was wrong about everything, for the ghost in Murphy's room was him. And what he mistook for gravity in her room was really love, as he finds the world line that represents love connected to the watch he left with her. He uses this world line to transmit the quantum data by Morse code to the big hand of her watch. The people of the future did not choose him to save the world. They chose him to be the bridge. They chose Murphy to save the world. And as there is nothing that can escape a black hole, Dr. Mann and Cooper both learned that no man can escape the human condition, no matter if he has a family or not, or no matter how far he travels from Earth. Although Christopher Nolan and his younger brother Jonathan are both credited with writing Interstellar, the film's premise was conceived by producer Linda Obst and theoretical physicist Kip Thorne, who both also collaborated on the 1997 film Contact. Paramount initially wanted Steven Spielberg to direct Interstellar from a script written by Jonathan Nolan, whom the film company hired in 2007. However, Steven Spielberg backed out of directing Interstellar after moving his production studio from Paramount over to Walt Disney Studios in 2009, a development that prompted Paramount to hire Christopher Nolan in 2014 on his brother's recommendation. Both the film script and production represents a pair of collaborations, with the final script combining scripts written individually by Christopher and his brother Jonathan, while the film is co-produced by Christopher Nolan's company Syncopy and Linda Obst's company Linda Obst Productions. Director Christopher Nolan wanted Interstellar to be premised on a worldwide Dust Bowl-like event threatening man's existence. To bring realism to his film, Nolan received permission from director Ken Burns and producer Dayton Duncan to use interview clips from their 2012 documentary Dust Bowl. The real interviews with Dust Bowl survivors from that documentary are seamlessly combined with interview snippets of actors in Interstellar, recalling what life was like during the movie's fictional dust storm. Dutch-Swedish cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema filmed Interstellar on 35mm film in anamorphic format and IMAX 70mm photography. The director wanted to capture as much of the film in camera as possible and use practical set elements instead of CGI. For example, the interior cockpit of the Endurance space station was a physical set rather than a virtual set rendered on a green screen. For the film's musical score, Nolan brought in Hans Zimmer, who also scored Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy as well as Nolan's 2010 science fiction thriller Inception. Instead of providing emotional cues from the film script or plot details, Nolan gave Zimmer a single-page synopsis of a father leaving his daughter for work, which gave Zimmer the musical inspiration he needed for all of the scenes throughout the film. The spaceships in the film, the Rangers, the Endurance, and the Landers, take their look and functional cues from real life. For instance, the Ranger shuttles in the film are modeled after the reusable low Earth orbital spacecraft systems or space shuttles that NASA used from 1981 to 2011. The Endurance space station, a circular ship made up of small interlocking modules, is modeled off of the International Space Station, according to production designer Nathan Crowley. The space vehicles in the film were miniature models that were shot and scaled up in rear projection behind the actors, instead of having the actors perform in front of green screens and adding in digital effects in post-production. For the robots featured in Interstellar, Christopher Nolan differentiated them aesthetically from humans. Instead, the robots in his film look like quadrilateral blocks that can be articulated by hidden joints into various practical shapes, such as arms and legs. There's no confusing them with humans by their appearances. Beyond their appearances, however, the robots and humans in the film are almost indistinguishable. Executive producer Kip Thorne gave Christopher Nolan two conditions in directing Interstellar. Number one, that Nolan would agree not to violate established physical laws. And two, that Nolan would refrain from taking creative liberties in the script at the expense of real science. Nolan agreed to Thorne's conditions. In fact, the science in Interstellar impressed astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson so much that he went on to say that it was theoretically possible to interact with the past as Nolan had depicted in the film. In order to flesh out Kip Thorne's and Linda Obst's 8-page treatment for Interstellar, Jonathan Nolan studied relativity at the California Institute of Technology. Jonathan Nolan drew inspiration from Disney's 2008 animated film WALL-E, as well as 20th Century Fox's 2009 science fiction action adventure Avatar. His brother Christopher drew inspiration from Fritz Lang's 1927 film Metropolis, Stanley Kubrick's 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey, Ridley Scott's 1982 film Blade Runner, and Steven Spielberg's 1975 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Christopher Nolan said that he wanted to make a science fiction film that was accessible to mainstream audiences. However, unlike most mainstream films, Interstellar challenges you to think. Thanks for watching my analysis of Interstellar, starring Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Michael Caine, David Gaiese, Jessica Chastain, David Oyelowo, Ellen Burstyn, John Lithgow, and Matt Damon. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos like this one. Thank you.